I never thought I'd be the one to tear my wife's family apart. But when they attacked her in front of our 3-year-old daughter, something in me broke. The worst part? My wife just stood there, taking it all, the insults, the blame, the shame. Her silence that day haunted me, but I didn't understand it until later. You see, my in-laws were pillars of our community, respected church leaders with a reputation for charity and kindness. No one would believe they were monsters behind closed doors. No one, except me, who witnessed it firsthand that Thanksgiving. What happened next wasn't revenge, it was justice. My wife wasn't silent because she was weak. She was silent because she was planning. And when she finally made her move, she didn't just hurt them. She took everything they valued. Their reputation, their standing, their legacy. I'm sharing this because you need to know. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. My wife taught me that. And by the end of this story, my in-laws learned it too, the hard way. My wife, Eliza, grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, in one of those grand colonial houses with perfect white columns and manicured lawns that scream old money. Her parents, Robert and Margaret Hamilton, weren't just wealthy, they were Connecticut royalty. 3 generations of bankers, country club memberships, and enough political connections to get a speeding ticket erased with a phone call. I met Eliza in grad school. She was studying art history. I was finishing my MBA. She was quiet, reserved, almost painfully shy, nothing like the confident daughter of privilege I'd expected. We fell in love over coffee and museum visits, and for 2 years, her family remained this abstract entity she rarely discussed. The first time I visited the Hamilton estate, I understood why. Their home wasn't just a house, it was a stage, and every family interaction was a performance.
Margaret, my mother-in-law, orchestrated everything with the precision of a general. The way the table was set, how everyone dressed for dinner, which topics were acceptable for conversation. Robert, meanwhile, was the quiet authority who could silence a room with a glance. Elizabeth, Margaret would say, never Eliza, the name my wife preferred. Shoulders back, dear. A Hamilton doesn't slouch. Or, Elizabeth, perhaps you should reconsider that second helping. Remember your summer dress still needs altering. I'll never forget Eliza's 26th birthday dinner. We'd been dating for almost a year, and Margaret had arranged a small family gathering, which meant 40 people, including 2 state senators and a federal judge. Eliza had spent weeks anxious about it. During the toast, Margaret stood up, crystal champagne flute in hand, and said, "To our Elizabeth, who has always been a unique addition to the Hamilton legacy. Perhaps this year she'll finally find her purpose." The room laughed politely. Eliza smiled, but I watched her hands trembling beneath the table. That night, she told me how she'd once exhibited her paintings in a small campus gallery during college. Her parents had come, bringing several of their friends. As they walked through, Margaret loudly commented on how experimental the work was, code for amateurish, and suggested that some hobbies are best kept private. She'd never shown her art publicly again. When I proposed to Eliza, I did it in a small art studio I'd rented for the occasion, filled with her paintings I'd secretly collected and framed. "Your art deserves to be seen," I told her, "and so do you." The Hamiltons handled our engagement with practiced grace. They hosted an extravagant party, approved of my business school credentials and my family's respectable, if modest, background.
Robert even took me golfing, where between holes he casually mentioned their expectation that Eliza would eventually join the family foundation once we settled down. What they never mentioned, what I discovered only through an old family friend who'd had too much to drink at our wedding, was the Hamilton secret. The fortune that sustained their perfect life, their philanthropy, their social standing, hadn't come solely from banking. 3 generations ago, during Prohibition, Eliza's great-grandfather had built their wealth running bootleg liquor from Canada. Later, in the 1980s, Robert Hamilton had doubled it through insider trading schemes that narrowly avoided prosecution. "The Hamiltons," the friend slurred, "always know which rules they can break and which appearances they must keep." I never told Eliza what I'd learned. She was already nervous about our marriage, about whether she was betraying her family by marrying someone who didn't fit their perfect mold. Instead, I made a silent promise to protect her from them however I could. We settled in Hartford, close enough to visit, but far enough to breathe. Eliza started painting again, small pieces at first. I encouraged her to join a local artists' collective. We were happy, building a life on our terms. Then came 2 developments that would change everything. Eliza got pregnant, and Robert Hamilton announced his plan to establish the Hamilton Family Trust, a $50 million foundation that would cement their legacy of philanthropy for generations. The grand gesture was coming, and with it, the beginning of our nightmare. Our daughter Sophie was born on a snowy December morning. She had Eliza's delicate features and curious eyes, and from the moment I held her, I knew I'd do anything to protect her from becoming another Hamilton casualty. The Hamiltons, predictably, had opinions.
The nursery we designed wasn't appropriate. Our decision for Eliza to breastfeed was unnecessary in this day and age. My choice to take paternity leave was indulgent. But something had shifted in Eliza since becoming a mother. Each criticism was met with a quiet, "Thank you for your input, Mother," followed by us doing exactly as we'd planned. As Sophie grew into a toddler, I noticed Eliza documenting everything, taking photos, keeping journals, recording videos of family gatherings. "For Sophie's memories," she'd say. I didn't question it. Motherhood had awakened something in my wife. A protective instinct, yes, but something else too. A vigilance, a purpose. The invitation to Thanksgiving at the Hamilton estate came with Margaret's usual detailed instructions. Arrival time, 2 p.m. sharp. Dress code, holiday formal. Our contribution, nothing, because Elizabeth has never had a knack for the kitchen. I suggested declining, but Eliza insisted we go. "The Hamilton Family Trust announcement will happen at Thanksgiving," she explained. "Dad has been working on it for years. The lawyers, the board structure, the press coverage. It's important we're there." "For the trust?" I asked. "For me," she answered, with a look I couldn't quite interpret. The days before Thanksgiving, Eliza was unusually busy. Phone calls behind closed doors, meetings with people she described vaguely as old friends. Late nights at her computer that she'd close whenever I entered the room. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile and say, "Just preparing for Thanksgiving. You know how it is with my family." I did know, which is why her calmness unnerved me. The day arrived crisp and bright, a picture-perfect New England Thanksgiving. Sophie was adorable in her burgundy velvet dress, patent leather shoes clicking on the marble foyer as we entered the Hamilton mansion. Margaret immediately swept in, cooing over Sophie, while simultaneously noting she looked a bit pale. Perhaps she's not getting enough sun. The house was immaculate, decorated with tasteful autumn arrangements and set for 20 guests. Robert's business associates, local politicians, the board members for the soon-to-be-announced trust. Eliza's brother James was there with his wife Victoria, both lawyers at the same prestigious firm, both openly condescending about my more modest business consulting practice. "Still helping those small companies find their footing?" James asked, swirling his scotch. "How fulfilling that must be." Eliza navigated the pre-dinner mingling with unusual confidence, introducing Sophie to everyone, engaging in conversations I'd typically have to pull her into. She kept glancing at her watch, checking her phone. When a text came in around 3:30, she read it, took a deep breath, and whispered to me, "Whatever happens in the next few hours, remember, I love you, and I've got this." Before I could ask what she meant, Robert clinked his glass for attention.
Before we sit for dinner, I'd like everyone to join me in the study. We have a special announcement. The study was Robert's sanctuary. Leather-bound books, hunting trophies, a massive mahogany desk where family decisions were rendered like judicial opinions. We gathered around as Robert proudly unveiled an architectural model of the Hamilton Center for Community Leadership and a framed mock-up of the trust letterhead. Margaret handed out press packets. $50 million, Robert announced, to ensure the Hamilton legacy of leadership and philanthropy continues for generations. Elizabeth, James, this will be your inheritance, your responsibility to carry forward. Applause rippled through the room. James stepped forward to say a few appropriate words about family legacy and civic duty. Then all eyes turned to Eliza.
Elizabeth, Margaret prompted, surely you have something to add about this momentous family occasion. Eliza looked at her watch again, then smiled. Actually, I do, but perhaps we should eat first. I believe dinner is ready. Margaret's face tightened at this deviation from her script, but she recovered quickly. Of course, let's proceed to the dining room. The tension was building as we took our seats at the long table beneath the ancestral portraits. Sophie, overtired and sensing the atmosphere, became fussy. I offered to take her for a little walk around the house. No, Margaret said sharply. Children need to learn proper behavior at appropriate functions. Elizabeth certainly did. Actually, Eliza said, passing Sophie to me, I think a short break would be good. In fact, I need a moment myself. She followed us out into the hallway, checked her phone again, and whispered, They're here. 3 minutes. Who's here? I asked, but she just kissed Sophie's forehead, squeezed my hand, and returned to the dining room. When Sophie and I returned, the first course was being served, Margaret's famous butternut squash soup with sage. The conversation had turned to politics, with Robert holding forth about the latest tax legislation that would unfairly burden wealth creators. I noticed Eliza wasn't eating, just watching the ornate grandfather clock in the corner. At precisely 4:17 p.m., the doorbell rang. Are we expecting someone else? Robert asked Margaret, annoyed at the interruption. No, Margaret replied, already rising to instruct the housekeeper. Francine, please inform whoever it is that we are not receiving visitors. But Eliza stood up. Actually, they're here for me. I invited them. The room fell silent. In the 7 years I'd known the Hamiltons, I had never heard anyone contradict the established order of their household.
You did what? Margaret's voice was dangerously soft. I invited guests to Thanksgiving, Eliza repeated, louder now. They're journalists from the Boston Globe, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Robert's face darkened. What is the meaning of this, Elizabeth? The doorbell rang again, more insistently. Sophie started crying. And that's when Margaret snapped. For God's sake, control your child, she hissed at Eliza. This behavior, your behavior, is precisely why we've had reservations about your role in the trust. You've always been the disappointment, Elizabeth. Always the problem. I stood up, Sophie in my arms. That's enough, Margaret. Sit down, Robert commanded. This is a family matter. Exactly, Eliza said, still eerily calm. A family matter, which is why I think it's time we all showed our true family dynamics to the world. The doorbell rang a third time, and Francine looked uncertainly between Robert and Eliza. Don't you dare open that door, Robert said, his voice low with warming. I'm live streaming this on Instagram right now, to my private art account, the one with several arts journalists and gallery owners who follow me. Should I add the reporters outside too? The color drained from Margaret's face. You wouldn't dare. Actually, I've been daring for quite some time now, Eliza replied, setting her phone on the table, camera facing the room. 3 years of documenting every interaction, every criticism, every manipulation. Did you know Connecticut is a one-party consent state for recordings?
I did. I clutched Sophie closer, finally understanding what Eliza had been doing all this time. The photos, the videos, the documentation.
Elizabeth. Robert's voice took on the reasonable tone he used for business negotiations. Whatever grievances you think you have, this is hardly the venue. No, Dad, this is exactly the venue. Your precious Hamilton Family Trust announcement, your carefully selected audience of influential people, your perfectly orchestrated family image. It's the perfect time to reveal what the Hamiltons really are. Margaret stood up, trembling. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. Like how you speak to me, Eliza shot back. Like how you've spoken to me my entire life? Let me give everyone a sample. She tapped her phone, and suddenly Margaret's voice filled the dining room. Elizabeth, honestly, did you have to wear that dress? It makes you look like you're trying too hard. No one wants to see art about feelings, dear. It's self-indulgent. I suppose someone has to marry her, but couldn't you have found someone more suitable? Snippets of conversations, years of them, played one after another. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Victoria, James's wife, stared at her plate. James looked between his sister and his parents, uncharacteristically silent. "Turn that off immediately," Robert demanded. "I have 3 years of these," Eliza continued calmly, "plus financial documents. Did you know Dad's been filtering foundation money through shell companies back to his personal accounts? Or that Mother's been having an affair with Senator Wilson for almost a decade? I have the emails, the bank statements, the hotel receipts." Senator Wilson, seated 3 chairs down, choked on his wine. "These are lies," Robert sputtered, but his eyes betrayed him, darting nervously to the door where the journalists waited. Eliza's voice was steady now, stronger than I'd ever heard it. "The trust announcement isn't really about philanthropy, is it? It's about legacy laundering. Rewriting the Hamilton history, from bootleggers and insider traders to great civic benefactors." Gasps around the table. Margaret swayed slightly. "How dare you?" she whispered. "After everything we've given you." "Given me?" Eliza laughed, a sound I'd rarely heard from her. "You've given me anxiety, self-doubt, and the constant message that I'm not enough. The only worthwhile thing that came from this family is my capacity to recognize emotional abuse when I see it. And I refuse to let my daughter grow up thinking what you did to me is normal." Sophie whimpered in my arms, sensing the tension. Margaret's eyes flicked to her, then back to Eliza. "You always were too sensitive," Margaret snapped. "This little performance proves it. And now you're going to ruin everything because you can't handle a little criticism? Pathetic." That word, pathetic, seemed to hang in the air. The same word Margaret had used when Eliza had shown her first painting, when she'd chosen her college major, when she'd announced our engagement. Eliza picked up her phone, tapped the screen, and stood. "The journalists outside have just received an email with select recordings and documents. They're especially interested in the trust's connection to 3 offshore accounts and a certain development project that displaced an entire neighborhood of low-income families last year." Robert lunged for the phone, but I was faster, stepping between them. Sophie began to cry in earnest now. "See what you've done," Margaret hissed, gesturing at Sophie. "You're upsetting your child with this ridiculous scene. Is that what good mothers do, Elizabeth?" And that was the moment Eliza had been waiting for. I saw it in her eyes, the trap springing shut. "No, Mother. Good mothers protect their children. They don't tear them down." She turned to the phone's camera. "I want to make it very clear to everyone watching. This is what happened every time." I would be attacked, criticized, belittled, and then blamed for being upset about it. It's called gaslighting, and it stops today. She picked up her coat and Sophie's little red jacket.
The Hamilton family trust announcement will still make the papers tomorrow, but not the way you planned. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because secrets and lies have protected abusers in this family for generations, and I won't be complicit anymore." Robert stood, his authority crumbling visibly. "If you walk out that door, you are no longer a Hamilton. You will be cut off completely." Eliza smiled for the first time that evening. "That's the best news I've heard all day." She took Sophie from my arms, kissed her forehead, and headed for the door. I followed, but paused to look back at the wreckage of the perfect Hamilton Thanksgiving. Margaret had collapsed into her chair, her social mask completely shattered. Robert was already on his phone, likely calling lawyers. The guests were murmuring, some already making excuses to leave. And James? James was staring at Eliza with something that looked almost like respect. As we reached the foyer, we could hear the journalists on the porch, their questions already starting. Eliza turned to me, our daughter between us. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," she said quietly. "I couldn't risk anyone trying to talk me out of it." "I wouldn't have," I assured her, and realized it was true. This moment, my wife standing tall, finally free, was worth whatever came next. Eliza took a deep breath and opened the door to face the cameras, not as a Hamilton, but as herself, for perhaps the first time in her life. The aftermath was both exactly what I expected and nothing like I imagined. By midnight, #HamiltonGate was trending. By morning, it had exploded. The Boston Globe ran with "Connecticut Dynasty's Dark Secrets Exposed." The Wall Street Journal focused on the financial allegations, with "Hamilton Trust Scrutinized for Potential Fraud." Local news vans parked outside the Hamilton estate. Robert's law firm issued a terse no comment. The Hamilton Center for Community Leadership was indefinitely postponed. We stayed at a hotel that night, Sophie sleeping peacefully between us while Eliza and I talked until dawn. She showed me everything, 3 years of meticulously organized evidence, voice recordings, email exchanges, financial documents that a forensic accountant friend had helped her analyze, the carefully cultivated relationships with journalists who specialized in exposing corruption. "I kept waiting for them to change," she explained, her voice hollow. "After we got married, after Sophie was born, I thought surely they'd see what they were doing. But when Mother started treating Sophie the way she treated me, measuring her, criticizing her development, calling her difficult at 2 years old, I knew it would never stop unless I stopped it." I held her as she finally allowed herself to cry. Not for the family she was losing, but for the family she'd never really had. The next morning, unexpectedly, James called. "Can we meet?" he asked, his usual smugness absent. Just us, no lawyers. We agreed to a quiet coffee shop in West Hartford. James arrived looking like he hadn't slept, his tailored suit uncharacteristically rumpled. "I want you to know," he began awkwardly, "I've resigned from the trust board. I've also withdrawn from representing Dad legally." Eliza studied her brother. "Why now? You've watched this happen my entire life." James stared into his coffee. "I told myself you were exaggerating, that you were just more sensitive than me. That's what they always said, and I believed them." He looked up, genuinely pained. "The recordings, Eliza. Hearing them all together like that, I had no idea how bad it really was." "You didn't want to know," she said, not unkindly. "No, I didn't." He pulled out a flash drive. "But I want to make it right. This has everything. Trust documents, board meeting minutes, private emails about the development project. Dad's been bribing city officials for years. The property displacements weren't just unethical, they were illegal." Eliza took the drive, her hand steady. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you were brave enough to stand up. And because," he hesitated, "Victoria's pregnant. I don't want my child growing up in that environment either." That meeting was the first of many revelations. Former Hamilton household staff came forward with their own stories. Business associates distanced themselves. Senator Wilson announced he wouldn't seek re-election. The Hamilton estate was suddenly very quiet. The holiday parties canceled, the social invitations declined. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, the Attorney General's office announced an investigation into the Hamilton financial dealings. Robert's assets were frozen. The family's legal team was working overtime to negotiate plea deals and settlements. Margaret made only one attempt to contact us, a voicemail that veered between tearful pleas and bitter accusations. "This vendetta will destroy your father," she said. "Is that what you wanted? To ruin this family?" Eliza listened to it once, then deleted it. "That's not what I wanted," she told me later. "I just wanted them to stop. I wanted them to see me, really see me. But they never could." Instead of letting the pain consume her, Eliza channeled it into her art. She began painting again, large, powerful canvases, exploring themes of silence, voice, and liberation. When a small gallery in Hartford offered her a solo exhibition, she titled it Breaking Patterns. On opening night, the gallery was packed, not just with art lovers, but with people who'd followed her story. Women who'd escaped their own toxic families, advocates for financial transparency and philanthropy, young artists who saw in Eliza a model of authentic expression. I watched my wife move through the crowd, confident in a way I'd never seen before, explaining her process, accepting congratulations. Sophie toddled alongside her, proudly pointing at Mommy's paintings. The most striking piece, the centerpiece of the exhibition, was a large triptych titled Inheritance. The first panel showed a young girl silenced by shadowy figures. The second depicted a woman breaking free from gilded chains. The third showed a mother and child standing in sunlight, surrounded by a new kind of family, one built on choice rather than blood. As visitors studied it, I overheard one woman say, "It's about the Hamiltons, right? That scandal?" "It's about more than that," another replied. "It's about cycles, breaking them." That night, after the exhibition, we received an unexpected email from Victoria, James's wife. Attached was a recent photo taken by one of Margaret's friends at the country club. Robert and Margaret, looking years older, sitting alone at their usual table, surrounded by empty chairs. "Thought you should see this," Victoria wrote. "They're selling the house, moving to Florida. James and I are staying here. We'd like Sophie to know her cousin when the baby comes, if that's something you'd consider." Eliza stared at the photo for a long time. "They look so small," she finally said. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm not sad, if that's what you're asking. She searched for the word, free. The Hamilton family trust never materialized, but something more valuable emerged from its ashes. 6 months after the confrontation, Eliza established the Pattern Breakers Foundation, using her portion of the family assets that were released after the legal settlements. Its mission? Supporting survivors of family abuse and funding art therapy programs. At the foundation's first fundraiser, a reporter asked Eliza if she had any contact with her parents. "No," she answered simply, "but I hope they're finding peace." "Do you forgive them?" the reporter pressed. Eliza considered this, then said, "Forgiveness isn't the point. Understanding is. I understand now that they were trapped in their own patterns, just as I was. The difference is, I chose to break mine." Later that night, as we put Sophie to bed, she asked about her grandparents. She was 4 now, old enough to notice their absence, young enough to accept simple explanations. "Mommy's parents live far away," Eliza told her. "Sometimes families need space from each other to be healthy." "Like time out?" Sophie asked, her perception startling as always. "Something like that," Eliza smiled. "But you know what? Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who loves you and sees you for exactly who you are." Sophie nodded, satisfied with this answer, and drifted off to sleep clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, a gift from Uncle James and Aunt Victoria, who were becoming regular visitors, bringing their newborn son for playdates. That night, Eliza showed me her newest painting, still in progress, a small canvas unlike her recent bold works. It showed a little girl who looked like Sophie, planting seeds in a garden.
It's called New Roots, she explained, because that's what we're doing, isn't it? Planting something different for her to grow from. As I held my wife in our quiet home, a home free from manipulation, criticism, and the crushing weight of toxic expectations, I realized the true victory wasn't in taking everything from the Hamiltons.
They had done that to themselves. The victory was in what Eliza had taken back: her voice, her worth, her future, and most importantly, our daughters. It's been 5 years since that Thanksgiving Day. Sophie is 8 now, flourishing in ways that might never have been possible under the shadow of her grandparents' expectations. Eliza's art hangs in galleries across New England. The Pattern Breakers Foundation has helped hundreds of families escape cycles of emotional abuse. As for the Hamiltons, they live quietly in a gated community in Naples, Florida. I hear Robert plays golf daily and Margaret joined a garden club. They've never met their grandson, James's boy. They've never asked to see Sophie again. Some patterns are too deeply ingrained to break, but that's their loss, not ours. People often ask if I regret that day, if I wish Eliza had found a less public way to confront her family. I always tell them the same thing. Sometimes the most healing thing isn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It's simply the truth, spoken aloud after years of silence. My wife wasn't silent that day because she was weak. She was silent because she was gathering her strength. And when she finally spoke, she didn't just reclaim her own voice. She created space for others to find theirs. If you're watching this and something in our story resonates with you, remember, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You don't have to accept behavior that diminishes you. And you certainly don't have to pass those patterns down to your children. Breaking the cycle isn't selfish. It's the most generous gift you can give to the next generation. If you found value in this story, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life experiences that might help you navigate your own family dynamics. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your voice matters here. And remember to hit that like button to help others find this content. Because the first step in breaking patterns is knowing you're not alone in wanting something better. Thank you for listening to our story.